Welcome to Reddit War Room Podcast. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a really fascinating snapshot of life inside the U.S. Army. We're talking late 1980s here.
Yeah, this is a good one. It comes from the Tri-Military Stories subreddit. Always a great source for these kinds of insights.
Absolutely. And this particular story gives us a real window, doesn't it, into the dynamics within a brigade's operations office back then.
Oh, definitely. You get the pressures, the personalities, the tech they were dealing with, and, well, ultimately, a pretty clever bit of leadership that solved a, let's say, persistent problem.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack this specific anecdote. We've got a specialist, a captain, and a lesson in accountability that apparently took a while to sink in.
Right. We want to understand the players, the conflict, how it got resolved, and maybe most importantly, what we can learn from it, even decades later.
Yeah, totally relevant outside the military context, too, I think.
For sure. It's kind of a classic workplace story, just, wearing green. So at the heart of it, you've got the key players. First, there's the specialist who actually shared the story.
Okay.
An administrative specialist. And their role was, well, absolutely crucial. Think speed, think precision, accuracy.
Right, the person actually getting the work out the door.
Exactly. Typing up vital reports, filing, often under really tight deadlines.
Yeah.
And the quality had to be perfect. Their fingers on the keyboard were basically the bottleneck for a lot of important stuff leaving that office.
Okay, so a critical role, and then the antagonist, I guess we could call him, the captain.
Yeah, the captain. The story paints him as having this very specific and, let's be honest, frustrating habit, the just-in-time report submission.
The classic. Not just meeting the deadline, but like right at the deadline.
Or maybe even a bit past it, functionally speaking. His signature move, apparently, was handing over these rough, often messy handwritten drafts of critical reports late on a Friday afternoon.
Oh, don't tell me.
Yeah. Reports that were invariably due first thing Monday morning. And this wasn't like a one-off. It was his pattern.
Wow. The story even gives specific times, right?
It does. Friday, 4:30 p.m. drop-off for an 8 a.m. Monday deadline. You can immediately see the problem there.
Right, because 4:30 p.m. Friday, the captain's probably heading out, but the specialist, they're stuck.
Exactly. That Friday afternoon dump landed squarely on the specialist's desk every single time.
So that means late nights, weekends.
Yep. Constantly forced to work late on Fridays, often way into the evening, or even having to come in over the weekend just to get these reports typed, formatted, looking professional by Monday morning.
And the drafts were rough, you said. Not easy to work with.
That's the other key part. Rough handwriting, maybe grammar issues, formatting needed. The specialist had to basically polish a raw document without the captain around for questions or review because he'd already bolted for the weekend.
And for a specialist, a lower-ranked enlisted soldier handling an officer's report, that carries some weight, doesn't it? Some risk.
Oh, absolutely. Huge risk. Any mistake, any typo, any misinterpretation of those messy notes could potentially make the captain look bad further up the chain.
And the captain's not there to take the heat.
Exactly. The blowback wouldn't land on the guy who wrote the rough draft and left. It would fall straight onto the specialist who typed it up under pressure.
Wow. So it wasn't just stealing their personal time. It was actually putting their performance record on the line.
Precisely. It's a really stark example of how a leader's, frankly, poor planning and just relying on their subordinate can create a massive burden and vulnerability for that person.
Okay, so this is the background, this frustrating cycle. What finally broke it? What was the catalyst for change?
Well, the story points to one specific day. It was after a field exercise, and apparently it had gone really well. Unit did great, morale's probably up.
Okay, good vibes all around.
Yeah, and maybe as a kind of thank you for the hard work, the major in charge decided to let everyone leave early that Friday. So the captain, probably eager to start his early weekend, actually gets his report in a little earlier than usual, maybe 3:30 p.m. But still, the same rough handwritten format.
So he drops the messy draft, knowing it needs hours of work, and then just heads out because everyone's getting cut loose early.
That's exactly how it went down. And it's right after the captain makes his exit that the master sergeant, the senior NCO, the top enlisted leader in the office, comes around.
Okay.
He's announcing the early release, making sure everyone's wrapping up, and that's when he sees the specialist still sitting there, desk piled high.
And the specialist had to explain why they weren't packing up.
Yep. Had to tell the master sergeant, hey, I can't leave. Captain just dropped 4 to 6 hours of typing on me, due Monday. Effectively canceling out the major's reward for them.
Oof. How did the master sergeant take that?
Well, the story says his eyes narrowed. He saw the situation, the pile of paper, the clock, the specialist still working while everyone else is leaving.
He knew what was up.
Oh, yeah. He asked if this was a regular thing, and when the specialist confirmed it, he just gave this knowing nod, like, okay, I see the pattern now.
Maybe he'd heard whispers before, but this time it was blatant.
That's the sense you get. Seeing it happen right then, especially after a successful exercise when people earn that early release, probably made it particularly galling, undeniable.
So the master sergeant's now filling in the loop. What does he do? Fix it right there.
Not immediately solve it, no. But he promised to look into it. And crucially, he showed immediate support for the specialist, told them to knock off for supper at 5 p.m., made sure they took a break.
Good.
And he promised to back them up if the captain ever complained about the delay caused by eating dinner. That's that NCO leadership layer stepping up.
Yeah, recognizing the problem, supporting their soldier, and taking it up the chain, validating the frustration.
Exactly. He took ownership of finding a solution with the major.
Okay, so the seed is planted, Master Sergeant's aware, promises action. The story then jumps ahead a bit, right, to the major's actual plan.
Correct. It wasn't like the next Monday. The story says about 3 weeks went by before the major made his move.
Interesting. Letting it simmer or waiting for the right moment.
Maybe both.
Yeah.
And strategically, he didn't pick a Friday for his intervention.
No, it was a Wednesday.
A Wednesday, a seemingly totally normal Wednesday afternoon. Around 3:30 p.m., the major walks over to the specialist's desk.
Okay.
Says he has a task for the specialist, something that needs typing, formatting, the usual.
But he didn't just hand it over like normal, did he? There was something special about it.
Bingo. He gave it a very specific, very significant military label. He called it flash traffic.
Flash traffic. Okay, even I know that sounds serious. What exactly does that mean in Army terms?
It's the absolute highest priority level for messages. Flash traffic. It means whatever this task is, it overrides everything else, unless something else is also marked flash, which is super rare.
So drop everything, do this now.
Immediately. It demands instant attention. It's a designation you just don't throw around lightly. It's for critical, super time-sensitive stuff impacting operations, safety, you name it.
So the major just elevated this routine typing task to, like, DEFCON 1 status.
Pretty much. But here's the genius part. He attached a very specific string to it.
Which was?
He told the specialist explicitly, when you are done with this fill-fetch task, you are done for the day. Go home.
So not just top priority, but also a guaranteed early finish tied to completing the major's task?
Exactly. He created a hard stop for the specialist's workday, linked directly to finishing his task, the one with the official, untouchable high priority. The trap was perfectly set.
Okay, so picture this. Specialist is diligently working on the major's super important flash job, knowing they get to leave right after, and then clock strikes 4:30 p.m. on a Wednesday.
Right on cue. Just like it was Friday, the captain strolls up to the specialist's desk, and guess what he's holding?
Let me guess. Rough, handwritten report.
You got it. Needs to be done by 8 a.m. the next morning. His classic move, just shifted midweek.
And the specialist, now armed with the major's direct high-priority order, they knew exactly what to say. This wasn't just, sorry, I'm busy.
Oh, it was way more powerful than that. The specialist calmly explains they cannot possibly work on the captain's report right now. Why?
Because
the major gave them a flash traffic order. And this is the kicker. The major also explicitly ordered them to go home for the day immediately upon completing that flash task.
So starting the captain's hours-long task would directly violate the major's orders.
Precisely. It wasn't physically possible to obey the major and do the captain's work. The specialist couldn't start any new work, especially not something that would take hours.
And then the specialist delivered the checkmate move.
Yep, they calmly directed the captain. Sir, if you need this order changed, or if you need me to stay past the completion of this flash task, you'll have to go speak to the major.
Ooh, putting it right back on the captain to challenge the major's flash order. Brilliant.
It totally took the specialist out of the line of fire. It wasn't their refusal. It was the major's standing order. The captain now had to march into the major's office and basically ask him to cancel a flash priority and the soldier's authorized early departure, just so the captain could avoid doing his own typing.
You can just imagine the captain standing there, realizing what just happened. What was the immediate fallout?
Well, the story says the captain was probably surprised, maybe annoyed, but he didn't really have a leg to stand on, right? He had to go see the major.
And I bet that conversation was audible.
Apparently so. A few moments later, the specialist could clearly hear the major. uh, let's just say, energetically expressing his views from his office. Shouting was involved.
Huh. So the captain got an earful about his little routine.
It seems strongly implied, yes. A very direct, very loud explanation about why dropping last-minute work and expecting others to override legit orders wasn't going to fly.
Okay, so what happened with the specialists then? Did they get to leave?
They did. Finished the major's actual FLEH report, which
Yeah.
probably wasn't that long. The major checked it, approved it, and true to his word, released the specialist for the day.
Mission accomplished
But boy,
before they left.
before leaving, the specialists went back to their desk to grab their stuff. And who do they find sitting there?
The captain.
The captain himself. And this is where the story dives into the tech situation back then, which really explains why this was such a nightmare for the captain.
Right, the machine he was stuck using. What was it again?
An IBM display writer. Now, this was 1987. It wasn't quite a modern PC like we'd think of, though those were starting to appear. The display writer was a dedicated word processor.
Okay, specialized machine.
Yeah, built just for typing and printing. And the story and comments mention it used those big old 8-inch floppy disks, one for the operating system, another one to save your actual documents.
Wow, 8-inch floppies. That really dates it. Like a bit clunky even for 87 maybe, but still the workhorse in that office.
Yeah. Exactly. Still essential gear. But the captain, his skill level with this thing was, let's say, minimal.
How minimal?
He was, by his own admission apparently, a two-finger typist, hunt and peck.
Oh, dear. Compared to the specialist whose whole job was mastering that machine.
Right. The specialist estimated that the captain's report, the one he dropped off, would probably take them about 2 hours max.
Okay, 2 hours for the pro. And how long did it take Captain Two Fingers when he was forced to do it himself after the specialist left?
Well, when the specialist came back the next morning,
Mm-hmm.
they found him still there, still at the machine, looking absolutely wrecked. Haggard, the story says.
No way. He'd been there all night.
It sounds like it. Maybe 15 hours or more working on this report, and he still wasn't finished.
15 plus hours versus 2 hours. That's stark.
It's huge. It just perfectly shows the difference that skill makes, even on older tech.
Yeah.
The value of actually knowing how to use the tools you're given.
And didn't the comments on the Reddit post have some fun with this? The whole user error angle?
Oh yeah, people jumped right on that. They brought up all the classic IT support jokes, like PEBCAC.
Problem exists between keyboard and chair.
Exactly. Or PICNC.
Problem in chair, not in computer.
Right. It's funny, but it points to a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Often the bottleneck isn't the machine, even an old one. It's the person using it. The captain was a classic case, stuck dealing with the consequences of his own lack of proficiency under pressure.
The story mentions other tech too, right? Like printers and eventually PCs.
Yeah, it notes they had dot matrix printer, noisy things, and later upgraded to a proper PC, and even a plotter, which
Yeah.
was cool for graphics and charts back then. So you see that tech transition happening in the military, just like everywhere else.
Okay, so the specialist comes in, finds the captain looking like death warmed over, still typing. How did it finally end?
Well, the specialist, being a professional, actually finished the report for the captain, went through, fixed all the inevitable typos and formatting disasters that 15 hours of two-finger typing creates.
Saved him in the end. But the real kicker is about the captain learning his lesson, right?
Yeah, the punchline is basically that Captain Just in Time was, and I quote, a slow learner.
Meaning this whole ordeal, the shouting, the miserable all-nighter typing didn't instantly cure him?
Apparently not completely. The major actually had to pull the same flash traffic stunt, create another artificial high-priority task to get the specialist out the door on time 2 more times over the next few weeks.
Wow, he had to reinforce the lesson repeatedly.
Seems so. It took multiple direct encounters with the consequences before the captain's behavior really started to shift, or maybe just shifted enough while that specialist was still there. It wasn't an overnight fix.
Okay, so let's step back. Forget the 8-inch floppies for a second. What are the big takeaways here? What does the story teach us that still matters today?
Well, first off, it's just a brilliant example of, tactical leadership, isn't it? The major didn't just yell at the captain initially or write him up. He used an existing protocol, flash traffic, really creatively.
Right, weaponizing the rules, almost.
Kind of. He used the system itself to force the captain to feel the direct pain of his own actions. It gave the specialist a totally non-confrontational way to enforce a boundary, because it was backed by the major's authority. It's about using structure and leverage for accountability.
It also really hits home how much poor planning by one person can screw things up for others, especially subordinates.
Totally. The captain's habit wasn't just annoying, it stole time, added huge stress, and put the specialist's career at risk. It just hammers home how vital it is, especially if you're a leader, to think about the downstream impact of your work habits.
And don't forget the skill aspect. The specialist's proficiency was key.
Absolutely critical. Their mastery of that, frankly, outdated tech was essential for the office. The captain's lack of that basic skill became his punishment. It shows that even seemingly basic skills like typing or knowing your software really matter for overall team function.
So connecting this back to you, our listener, think about your own work life, maybe even personal projects. What does this make you think about managing expectations, yours and other people's?
Yeah, and how do you set boundaries when someone else's habits are messing with your time or your work quality? Maybe it's not always about direct confrontation. Maybe sometimes it's about uh, finding your own SK's traffic.
Or letting those natural consequences play out, right? The major didn't type the report for the captain. He made the captain face the music himself.
Exactly. Instead of always swooping in to rescue someone or just absorbing the extra work yourself, maybe letting them struggle with the mess they made is actually the most effective way to get them to change. Is that always possible? No. But it's worth considering.
It really is such a relatable story. I think everyone's dealt with a captain just in time somewhere along the line, or someone whose lack of prep creates chaos.
For sure. And seeing how this clear, deliberate intervention, using the rules, creating that hard stop, finally started to make a dent, is pretty insightful. It wasn't just talking, it was structured consequences.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe think about those persistent frustrations in your own world, those patterns where someone isn't quite pulling their weight with timing or preparation. Could there be a clear signal, your version of F-H traffic, or maybe just a strategically applied hard stop that could effectively shift that dynamic? What would that actually look like in your situation?